Hello guys, welcome to today's class. Today we will be studying the chapter number 8, which is a part of a new unit, the unit on electricity. Now we have already covered 7 of the chapters out of the 12 for our ICSE syllabus. So we have covered more than 50%, that's half of the syllabus and more is already covered. So this is a new unit on electricity where you shall have these 3 chapters, the one on current electricity that we will be starting today, followed by household electricity and electromagnetism. So electricity is one of those things with which we are all familiar with. It is one of those things without which our present life is unimaginable. Most of the things, the objects, the gadgets, the instruments that we use in our daily life is somehow dependent on electricity. Now we will get a chance to know that what is actually happening, what is the reason behind this current flowing, what are the concepts of potential and resistance when we study this chapter. Now you might already know this, that current I is equal to charge Q divided by time t. So the amount of current that is flowing, whether in a circuit or through a conductor, that is equal to the total charge Q that's flowing across a certain cross section of a conductor divided by the time it takes for the charge to flow. So current I is equal to charge Q divided by time t. Now the SI unit of charge is coulomb and the SI unit of time is second. Therefore current has got this unit, coulomb per second. Now this entire thing, coulomb per second, is in one word known as ampere. So the SI unit of current is ampere and it is represented by the symbol capital A. This is in honor of the scientist Andre Ampere, against whom this unit ampere is named, which is the SI unit of current. So the current that is flowing through a certain conductor or a circuit is said to be 1 ampere if a charge of 1 coulomb is flowing through a cross section of the conductor in a time 1 second. Now this can also be written as that the charge Q is N multiplied with E, where N is the total number of electrons and E is the charge of one electron. So if I have the cross section of a conductor something like this, say this is the thin wires which we see, and I am drawing a magnified view of that, and in this magnified view what is happening is, through this cross section of the conductor, for every unit time, that is in every 1 second, n number of electrons are passing through and each of these electron has a charge E. Then the total charge that is flowing per unit time through this cross section of the conductor is n into E. So therefore the current I can also be written as n into E divided by T. Now we can make a calculation here that if Q is equal to 1 coulomb, if the charge is 1 coulomb, and we already know charge of an electron is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb, then how many electrons are necessary so that in 1 second 1 coulomb charge is crossing every cross section of the conductor? So how do we find that? N, that is simply Q by E. So it's 1 divided by 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19. Same units get cancelled. This turns out to be 6.25 into 10 to the power 18. So you see, just for 1 coulomb of charge to pass through a conductor which is having a cross section area of 1 meter square, that's unit cross sectional area, in unit time, this humongous number of electrons has to pass. 10 to the power 18 is the order of magnitude. So you can imagine that if you are using some instrument or appliance which is switched on for an hour or more than that, you can imagine how many electrons must have passed, because this is the number of electrons that passes per second just for 1 coulomb of charge. So these are unimaginably big numbers. We next go into the concept of potential. The potential is one of those words with which you are familiar with. One of the areas where you have heard the word potential is potential energy. You have already done this in a previous chapter, that if a certain ball is dropped from a point A under gravity, it reaches a point B such that the height difference between points A and B is h. Then the potential energy at A is equal to mgh and the potential energy at B is 0. So quite obviously, when the ball is at A, it has got a higher potential energy, and when the ball is at B, it has got a lower potential energy. In this case, the potential energy that we are talking about is gravitational potential energy. And as we can see that the ball is moving from a higher gravitational potential to a lower gravitational potential. Similarly, if I have a container like this, say I have a thin capillary which is connected with a water bath with a beaker, and say this beaker has got water level up to this side and this has a water level up to this side, then what will happen? Water will flow from the capillary into the beaker. Though the beaker contains a greater volume of water than the capillary, water will be flowing from this direction, or let me say from point A to point B. The reason being that, as you know, there is a law of liquid pressure which says liquids always seek their own level. So this will flow until the level of water in the capillary as well as in the beaker reach an equilibrium, irrespective of what is the volume. The main point we need to note here is that again the flow of water is happening from a higher to a lower potential. In this case, the potential is due to pressure. Pressure in this portion A is equal to say h1 rho g, if this height is h1 above the base, and here if I say this height is h2, then the pressure at B is h2 rho g. Since h1 is greater than h2, the pressure here is greater, so again the water flows from a greater pressure to a lower pressure. In a third example, if I consider two bodies, say body A and body B, which are at temperatures say TA and TB. Now if the temperature of A is greater than the temperature of B, what's going to happen is heat will be flowing from the body A to the body B. We know this, that heat energy always flows from a body which is at a higher temperature to a body which is at a lower temperature. So once again, higher potential to lower potential. Now all of these things that quite obviously leads us to the concept of electricity. So when electricity was first discovered, the scientists said, well, just like these different analogies in nature, current should also flow from a higher potential to a lower potential. This is how currents should flow. That is what was their conception. Now we know that current is basically nothing but flow of electrons. It is electrons who carry the charge. So that means current flows from an area which has got a greater number of electrons to an area which has got a lesser number of electrons. So if there are say more electrons here and there are say less electrons here, electrons will flow from this point to this point. That is how electrons flow. But you also know that according to the convention, electrons have a negative charge. So the area which has got a greater number of electrons also has a greater negative charge than the area which has got a lesser number of electrons. But if you look into all these examples, you shall find that the flow is happening, whether it is the flow of a body or water or temperature and heat, it's always happening from a greater positive quantity to a smaller positive quantity. It is not happening from a negative to another negative quantity. So that is why scientists said, well, let us consider it like this. Let there be two directions for the flow of electric current. So if this region has got more electrons, say these are the negative charges, and this region has got lesser electrons, obviously current will flow from this direction to this one, because this has a greater number of electrons. So current will flow until the number of electrons here and number of electrons here, they equalize, that is they are in equilibrium. Current will flow for that duration. Let this be called the actual direction of current, ADC, the actual direction of current. And we know the area which has got a lesser number of electrons, therefore will be having a positive charge greater than the area which has got more number of electrons. More electrons means more negative charge, lesser positive charge. So therefore, the scientists said that let there be another direction of current from the greater positive charge to the lower positive charge. This will be the CDC, which is the conventional direction of current. So conventional direction of current is from the zone or from the area which has got a lesser number of electrons to the area which has got a greater number of electrons. But the actual direction of current is always from the place having more electrons to the place having less electrons. Thus there are these two directions of current. Whenever you will be drawing directions of current in circuit diagrams or solving numericals or experiments, you will always be dealing with the conventional direction of currents. In your mind you have to remember this, that yes, the electrons are actually flowing in an opposite direction. All of this is due to the convention. Initially, since the electrons were assigned a negative charge, as a result we had to face this difficulty. If electrons were initially assigned positive charge, if it was said that the kind of charge that electron possesses is positive, then the CDC and the ADC would have been the same. Having given you an intuitive idea of potential, we will now actually go into the details of what potential is. So what is this potential? How is potential defined? Well, potential is defined as the amount of work that is done in bringing a unit positive charge, a test charge, from infinity to the vicinity of this charge. So say I have a charge here, a positive charge here at this point A, and I am trying to bring a test charge to the point B. This is point A, this is the point B, where the influence of this positive charge can be felt, and I am bringing a charge from some arbitrary point O which is infinitely far away. So from there I am bringing a charge to the point B, and this charge has a value Q. This is a test charge. So whenever I am bringing a test charge Q from an infinitely far away distance to the point B, the amount of work that I have to do to bring it to point B is the potential at point B. So potential at B, that is V at B, is the amount of work I have to do to bring this charge from O to B. Now generally test charge has got a magnitude of 1 coulomb. Therefore potential and work, this equation is perfectly fine. But if we were carrying a test charge which has a magnitude greater than 1 or different from 1, that is say 5 coulomb, 6 coulomb and so on, in that case you have to divide it by Q. So this is the actual formula, that potential at any point, not just B, at any point of this around this charge A is equal to work done divided by the charge which we are bringing. So I can also write this, that W is V into Q. So if I am bringing or carrying a charge Q to a certain point in the vicinity of this charge where the field can be felt, then the work done is the potential at that point multiplied with Q. And you know that unit of work is joule and unit of charge is coulomb. Therefore the unit of potential can be written as joule per coulomb. However, this entire thing is called volt, symbolized by capital V. Now since work done by charge is equal to V, when do we say that the potential is 1 volt? The potential is said to be 1 volt when a work of 1 joule has to be done in bringing a charge of 1 coulomb from infinity to that point where we are measuring the potential. Now once we are familiar with the idea of potential, we can also find out what is potential difference. How do we find out? So let me have this charge again, A, in the vicinity of which we are calculating the potentials, and suppose I have 2 points, point B and point C. and then from an infinitely far away point O, I am bringing a test charge Q towards A. Now first I make a stop at C. What is potential at C? That is work done from O to C divided by Q. And what is potential at B? That is work done in bringing the charge from O to B divided by Q. Therefore, what is the potential difference? Potential difference VB minus VC between the 2 points is work OB minus work OC divided by Q. So therefore, this entire thing is called potential difference. Potential difference is equal to del W divided by Q. The difference between the work which is done in carrying the charge between the 2 points divided by Q. Now since you see that the work which has to be done to bringing the charge from infinity doesn't matter here, the amount of work that you are doing in this region doesn't matter, because when you subtract VB minus VC, this gets cancelled. What remains is this portion. Therefore, whenever you are finding out potential difference between any 2 points, it is simply work that is done to bring the charge from one point to other divided by the magnitude of the charge. Now that we are familiar with the concept of current and potential, now we shall go into the third part of the triangle, which is resistance. So electricity, it is said, has got these 3 corners of the triangle. Here we have resistance, here potential, here current. We have dealt with this 2, now we are left with resistance. So what is resistance? Resistance is the obstruction that is offered to the flow of current when it is traveling through a conductor or through a circuit. The obstruction that is provided by the material with which the conductor of the circuit is made, that is known as resistance, the obstruction that is offered. So how is resistance measured, or how does resistance originate? First of all, the SI unit of resistance is ohm, OHM, and the symbol is like this. This is a Greek symbol. So ohm is the unit for resistance, SI unit, and there's a formula which you will learn from Ohm's law, that V is equal to IR, from where you will get to see that resistance is therefore V divided by I, which is equal to volt per ampere. So therefore 1 ohm is equal to 1 volt divided by 1 ampere. Now before I move into the Ohm's law, let us talk about that how does the concept of resistance come into being. Why do materials provide resistance to something? So let me draw a zoomed in version of a wire. So this is, say, the cross section of a conducting wire that I have taken here. Now what is there inside the conducting wire? Obviously there will be atoms with which this particular material is being made. Atoms means that there will be the seat of positive charge, that's the nucleus, and along with that there will be electrons. So this is what atoms are basically, positive charges at the nucleus surrounded by electrons. Now as long as the wire is lying just like that, that means to say that at the 2 ends of the wire a potential difference is not applied. As long as that potential difference is not applied, the electrons will simply move randomly in all possible directions. Obviously here I am talking about the free electrons. There are some electrons which remain bound to the nucleus. They are so close to the nucleus that they cannot move freely. We are not talking about that, we are talking about the free electrons. So the free electrons in the outermost shells, they move randomly in various directions. There is no reason and no driving force behind the direction in which they move. But as soon as a potential difference is applied, say I apply a potential difference like this by connecting it to the ends of a battery. This is the plus end of the battery, this is the negative end. Now what will happen as soon as I do this? Well, you know, current will be flowing from the plus to the minus side. So this is how current is flowing, so electrons are moving in that direction. So as soon as this potential difference is applied, all the electrons in a disciplined manner, in a uniform manner, all move in the same direction. they start moving in the same direction, because now they are feeling an acceleration. There is a driving force which is making them move. But as they are moving, you can imagine, I have just drawn the zoomed in version of this section of the wire. The other sections of the wire lie as well. In all those sections, what happens? These positive charges, these cations, they remain behind. It is only the electrons which are moving, right? So the cations are there in their position. So suppose the electrons which are entering from this region into the zoomed in version, some of the electrons here, they will be able to pass freely, but some will be facing the obstruction. They will collide with these cations. The electrons will collide with the cations. This collision will reduce the speed of the electrons. It will provide an obstruction to the flow of electrons. However, since the potential difference is still there, the electrons will recover, they will gain speed and keep on moving. So this phenomenon is the reason why when current flows through a conductor or any material, it faces a resistance. It is mainly because of the collisions with the cations. This is what is the reason behind why resistance is offered, or resistance occurs in the different conductors. And the speed with which these electrons move, that is known as drift velocity. Remember one thing, that if you are talking about electrolytic solutions like electrolytes, or if you are talking about ionized gas tubes like the vacuum gas tubes, in those cases both positive and negative charges move. In electrolytes, cations move towards cathode, anions move towards anode. Similarly, in the ionized gas tubes, cations and anions both move. But when we are talking about metals, or when we are talking about conductors, in those cases it is only the electrons which do the moving. The cations, they don't move. Now, what are the factors on which resistance depend? First of all, resistance is directly proportional to the length of the conductor. So greater the length of the conductor, greater will be the resistance provided by that conductor. Resistance is inversely proportional to the area of cross section of the conductor, which is equal to pi r square. So if the area of cross section is increased, resistance decreases. Quite obvious, because if you see, if this is the area of cross section and the cation is sitting like this, the chances of an electron colliding with it is much greater. But if I increase the area of cross section and the cation is sitting here, the chances of collision of the electron with the cation is less, because now it has got other places through which it can pass. Similarly, resistance is proportional to length, because if the length of the conductor is small, the chances of collisions are less. But if the length of the conductor is greater, there will be more cations along the way and chances of collision again increases. Third, resistance is directly proportional to the temperature of the conductor. In this case, it has got a specific formula. The resistance of a conductor at a temperature T is resistance at temperature 0 multiplied with 1 plus alpha into delta T, where delta T is the change in temperature, that is T minus 0, and alpha is the coefficient of temperature coefficient of resistance, that is how much the resistance increases for every unit increase in the temperature. So this is how resistance varies with temperature for conductors, and resistance is directly proportional to temperature. As the temperature increases, the resistance also increases. This is what happens in the conductors. And what is the reason behind this? Once again, consider this kind of a cross-sectional area, and the cation is sitting here calmly. If you are heating this stuff, if the temperature is increasing, the cation will also start vibrating and moving. It will no longer sit still in a place, it will start vibrating and moving. So at some point it will be here, at some point it will be here, at some point it will be here. So the electrons which are coming in, had this cations been sitting tight in place, this electron would have passed undisturbed, undeflected, but now because it's vibrating, it's facing a obstruction here, so the resistance is increasing. And finally, the resistance, it depends on the nature of material with which the wave is made. We know there are different types of materials. Some materials, they are good conductors. For example, gold. Then we have copper. We have aluminium. We have silver. Gold is the best conductor of electricity, followed by silver. At third place we have aluminium and then copper. So these are the good conductors of electricity. At the same time, we know about something like glass, wood, plastic. These are poor conductors of electricity, or what we can say, they are insulators. They do not allow electric current to flow easily through them. So that obviously means that in this kind of insulators, the resistance offered to flow of current is greater as compared to this kind of conductors. So that is why we say resistance depends on nature of the material. So in short, what are the factors on which resistance depends? It depends on length. Greater the length, greater the resistance. It depends on area of cross section. Greater the area, lesser the resistance, because inverse relation. Depends on temperature. For a conductor, as temperature increases, resistance increases as per this relation, and this is the reason behind it. Finally, it depends upon the nature of the material. If it is like a good conductor, resistance offered will be less, and if it is like a good insulator, resistance offered will be more.